Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking an absolutely incredible, ancient framework that basically acts as an infallible compass for your spiritual practice. We'll be drawing directly from the Mahayana Mahaparinirvana Sutra, which, if you're familiar with it, contains some of the most profound wisdom out there on how to actually navigate the complexities of spiritual cultivation. Look, we have to start by confronting a massive problem in our spiritual journey. If you've spent any time at all exploring spirituality, you know exactly what I mean. We are constantly navigating this dense fog of charismatic teachers, incomplete doctrines, and, let's be real, sometimes outright deceptions. So how do you separate what's genuine from what's just a highly polished performance? How do you actually recognize the absolute truth? So here's our roadmap for This Explainer. We're going to hit the foundational guide to truth, then break down the four reliances: Dharma, meaning, wisdom, and definitive sutras, before we wrap up with the final revelation. Okay, jumping into section 1, finding the guide to truth. We need to figure out what this compass actually is. What's really fascinating here is how these four principles form a literal, infallible shield against spiritual confusion. The sutra presents these reliances to help us cut right past superficial appearances. By actually internalizing these 4 points, Dharma, meaning, wisdom, and definitive sutras, in your daily cultivation, you stop relying on flawed human perception and start aligning directly with eternal truth. It's a real game changer.
Section 2. Rely on Dharma, not the person. Let's dig into this first reliance.
Now, we really need to define what Dharma means in this context. It's not just a basic set of rules. We're talking about the constant, unchanging Dharma nature. It represents the ultimate eternal reality of the Tathagata, the Buddha. And here's the kicker. Because it is eternal, it is completely independent of the messenger who delivers it. This is where the rubber meets the road for your practical application. The source text gives this wild, profound example. It says, hey, even if Mara, the ultimate illusionist, shows up disguised as a Buddha, complete with all 32 majestic marks, radiating light, doing miracles, you still have to evaluate the substance of the teaching. In your daily life, you cannot let yourself be dazzled by a teacher's charisma or how many followers they have. If their actions contradict the unshakable truth of the Dharma, like, say, breaking ethical precepts for profit, you rely on the Dharma. You literally walk away from the person. Moving on to section 3, rely on meaning, not just words. So, what do we actually mean by meaning? Well, it's definitely not about constructing clever philosophical arguments or memorizing pretty poetry. According to the text, true meaning is the direct awakening to the fact that the Buddha nature is eternal and unchanging. It's an experiential realization, right? Not a linguistic one. And in your actual practice, keeping this in mind is a lifesaver. The text explicitly warns about people who use flowery language or who cleverly twist scripture to justify their own attachments. They might spin these beautiful words to argue that it's totally fine for spiritual practitioners to hoard wealth or give in to greed. The sutra is urging you to penetrate that illusion, rely on the underlying meaning, the ultimate liberation, and refuse to just swallow superficial words, no matter how eloquently someone says them. Section 4. Rely on wisdom, not consciousness. We're elevating our mode of perception here. The text draws a massive line in the sand here between consciousness and wisdom. Ordinary consciousness is just how we navigate our daily, fragmented lives, relying on our physical senses and temporary things. Wisdom, though, wisdom cuts right through that illusion. It's the profound recognition of the eternal Dharma body, which exists completely beyond physical limitations. Think about it like this. If you just rely on ordinary consciousness, you might view the Buddha simply as a historical guy made of physical elements, someone who needed to eat, who aged, and who eventually died. But relying on wisdom means knowing the Buddha's true nature is the eternal, indestructible Dharma body. For your daily cultivation, this is absolutely revolutionary. It means you have to actively shift your mental focus away from the temporary, decaying stuff and anchor your meditation right into that eternal, underlying truth.
Section 5. Rely on definitive sutras. Let's talk about navigating texts.
Look, not all spiritual texts carry the exact same weight. Definitive sutras are those supreme teachings that pull absolutely zero punches. They give us the final, uncompromised destination, revealing the ultimate truth that the Buddha nature is eternal. The sutra uses a brilliant analogy for this. It compares non-definitive teachings to teaching a kid only half a word,
simply because that's all they can handle at the time. These are provisional teachings, basically stepping stones for beginners. They might say nirvana is just like a fire going out, or that everything is just suffering and emptiness. But the definitive texts, they reveal the ultimate spiritual realization of eternity and joy. In your practice, you've got to exercise discernment. Respect the stepping stones for sure, but anchor your ultimate study in the definitive texts that point directly to the eternal. Finally, Section 6, the final revelation and practical application. Let's bring the whole shebang together.
So, how does this actually transform your life? By actively, explicitly following these 4 steps in your daily cultivation, you build an impenetrable defense against deception. You look past the charismatic figures. You seek the real meaning beneath the flowery words. You elevate your limited, everyday consciousness up to profound spiritual wisdom. And you anchor your study in definitive texts. The sutra argues that this is exactly how you ensure your practice leads straight to true liberation, rather than just running in circles.
Take a look at this. This is essentially your spiritual cheat sheet. It beautifully synthesizes everything we've talked about into a totally clear, actionable framework. It shows you exactly what to rely on, the specific traps you need to avoid, and the ultimate truth that opens up when you apply the principle. I highly recommend keeping this mental structure handy whenever you encounter any new spiritual teachings. The sutra leaves us with this massive, profound promise. To rely on the Dharma is to rely on the Mahaparinirvana of the Tathagata. Meaning, when you strip away the big personalities, the empty words, the superficial consciousness, and the provisional stepping stones, you aren't just learning facts about the Buddha. You are directly connecting with the ultimate eternal state of the Buddha itself.
So I'm going to leave you with this to chew on. As you continue your own journey of cultivation, I want you to constantly ask yourself, are you getting swept up by the fleeting illusions and charismatic personalities of the world? Or are you utilizing these 4 reliances to anchor your mind directly to the eternal truth?